Hi everyone, and welcome to our Hitachi Solutions Metrics That Matter webinar series. Our topic today is supply chain collaboration. I am your host, Dinah Kennens, and joining us is our featured speaker, Rob Shillinger. Rob is the Business Intelligence Consulting Manager here at Hitachi Solutions, and he has over 15 years of experience implementing enterprise-wide solutions across North America for both organizations in the public and the private sectors. Rob's been fortunate to lead teams that help customers use the information generated by the analytic solutions that his teams have implemented to produce organizational wins, such as improved sales performance for a national chemical distributor, improved logistics efficiency and information availability for the Canadian Armed Forces non-combat relocations, and improved crew scheduling for provincial air ambulance service, to name just a few. We're very excited to have Rob joining us today and sharing his knowledge. And with that, I will pass it over to Rob.
Thanks, Dinah, and thanks everybody for joining us on our second series in Metrics That Matter. Today, let's talk about supply chain and let's talk about really supply chain collaboration and how putting a programmatic focus on that can improve the bottom line for your organization. Today's world is very complex. If you think about a supply chain, it very much reminds me of thinking of traffic. And with traffic, the transition points, the points of entry and leaving are the points that can cause trouble and prove benefit. Same with supply chain. In the international world of business we're in, there can be something like 11 points of transition from sourcing an item globally to selling it to a customer locally. And along the way, in each of those 11 points, there's opportunities and there's risks where you can benefit and improve the efficiency, the cost performance, the quality performance of your supply chain. Let's further understand what the problem is, what the context of what we're talking about today around supply chain collaboration and what it really means. Today, there is a need to deliver items faster, with higher quality, and with a lower cost, essentially a lower landed cost for the item. In order to do that, there's a number of items of things that organizations should really focus on. Because, for example, making a 1% investment in supply chain can actually yield a return that's far greater than 1%. Just through really math and through the ability to change the outcome of processes, those transition points along the way. Contrast that with the fact that today most processes are done manually, the level of automation is limited, and these are just two areas that can prove huge benefit. Also today, we need to be able to decide and make decisions quicker, faster, to react to changes in environment and cost in the supply of goods. And to do that, you need excellent information that's accurate, timely, easy to get at. Today, by contrast, a lot of the information to do things like spend analysis are sitting in multiple operational systems. It's really disparate data sources that organizations have, and in order to make those decisions, they need to bring that data together, combine it, and integrate it so that it's accurate and that it tells a full picture of again those 11 points of transition from the source of an item all the way to delivery to the end customer. Many surveys have said the complexity of those movements are increasing at an exponential rate. Everybody needs to be, there's a huge demand and focus on resiliency in the process, meaning if you have a supply shock for one vendor, do you have a strategy to mitigate that with other vendors? And in doing so, can you actually be able to react quickly, and are you looking at things in the rearview mirror, or are you able to do some kind of forecast in terms of the probability of events happening, and what is the accuracy of that forecast? And if you really bring this all together, we're talking about information that drives collaboration, and the collaboration is where you get the wins. And so you think of this as an ecosystem, including the vendor, your internal stakeholders, your procurement people, your contract people, your inventory folks, and your end customer. And by collaborating together and sharing information and being transparent about it, you can help, again, increase the efficiency, the outcomes, the cost benefits, the savings in your entire supply chain cycle. Which leads us to really our next point about where are some of these areas of improvement? Where can my organization look to find benefits? And there's really a number of areas where you can look to do that. You can identify areas, for example, in process compliance. You can look at how formalized is your procurement process. And studies have found that by formalizing the process, creating goals, measures, abilities to monitor, and abilities to do a level of predictability or forecasting, organizations have seen a consistent improvement in cost savings in, for example, the landed cost of an item or the transportation cost of an item. With this sort of procurement infrastructure in place, organizations have been shown to consistently outperform the organizations who don't have this level of sophistication in their process. Another area for improvement is really around the organization itself. It's about creating an internal environment and organization accountability from including senior management and through the entire staff, so people understand their roles, responsibilities, and accountability measures that they'll be judged against. And it's not just formulating this structure, it's maintaining this over time and making it part of the culture. And then broadening that to the external audience so that your suppliers, your vendors, even your customers have an ability to understand what they can expect in terms of performance for the whole supply chain, in terms of when a customer can receive an item after date of order, the cycle time for a supplier to fill that order, and everything along, again, those 11 points of transition. Because again, the complexity of movements, the complexity of sourcing items will do nothing more than just get more complex. So the sooner we formalize and essentially create a program around supply chain that includes internal, external, and customer stakeholders, the sooner these benefits can happen. And so this begs the question, what are the leading companies doing in this area? Where have they seen benefits? Where have they seen positive outcomes? And there's a number of areas where they've seen this. There's a client we worked with who, a national chemical distributor, and they noticed that their landed cost, actually their cost of delivery was going up, and they noticed that it had to do with their transportation efficiency. So by studying all their routes across North America, they identified that the driver efficiency, the use of the trucks, and all the operating expenses were trending higher because the drivers were not optimizing their routes. So by studying the routes, the customers, traffic patterns over time, even weather, they were able to change all the routes across North America, make them actually smaller, so that drivers had a more dense population of customers. And by doing this, they saved 10% on an annual basis. That essentially hits the bottom line. More importantly, what they did was they set a goal in their study that they wanted to meet a certain level of savings within 12, 18, 24 months. And not only did they meet that goal, but they exceeded it by 2%, which, as we said in the beginning, even a 1% change in your supply chain can have X% change in the bottom line. Now, what what the leading companies are also doing is they're looking to automate, or they actually are automating processes. The majority of processes in supply chain are manual. If you think about contracting, contract approvals, workflow, procurement processes for identifying restock levels, a lot of these are still manual processes. The leading companies are actually automating those and seeing significant benefits, not only in saving, but also employee satisfaction. By automating a lot of the routine processes, the employees can focus on the more higher value added things like finding better sourcing strategies, creating more creative contracts so that you can have more resiliency in your supply chain. And again, there's always a domino effect of these things. Savings in one area will have a ripple effect and produce multiple savings down the line. Another good example is a key focus on spend analysis. Essentially, how much does it cost in those transition points to take an item from the coffee bean fields all the way to the cup at Starbucks? And by looking at the cost of procuring the beans, grinding the beans, delivering the beans, and serving the beans, you can find ways in those movements to save money. And it may be the good itself, it may be the contracting, it may be procurement, it may be your resiliency in your supply chain to have multiple vendors so that you're never out of stock, or you can mitigate pricing and have a better pricing strategy. But again, this is all framed by a clear accountability structure where you have performance goals and ways to monitor them, and more importantly, ways to look backwards at them, how historical performance was doing, and use that information to try and predict inventory levels, forecast price movements with multiple variables, and change those variables over time so that your pricing can be as dynamic as possible. So now that we get a good sense of how to improve it, how do I go about assessing supply chain efficiencies in my organization? Where do I start? Where do I begin? And there is probably 6 different areas of focus to think about. One is your vendor performance. And when I say vendor performance, is quality of goods delivered, compliance with service level agreements, compliance with contract provisions, your buyer performance, how well your buyer is doing. Are they able to forecast properly? Do they account for risk in their contracting? Do they account for risk in their delivery cycles? Your procurement and contract team, how well can they generate new contracts? How well can they create contracts that are internationally viable? How quickly can they turn these around? And if we look at your overall spend analysis and really spend historical analysis and forecasting and the ability to factor in variables such as economic pressures, weather, supply chain disruptions, and projected growth in consumer behavior and in customer behavior, so that, again, you can create supply chain processes that would alleviate some of these risks. And lastly, but really all-encompassing, is overall supply chain process analysis. Have you ever examined the number of steps it takes to go from sourcing a new item to delivering that new item to the customer, and how many steps are along the way, and are there any ways to automate that to reduce the manual effort it takes to do that, and the potential savings that could happen. So there's a number of different ways to look at this issue. There's a number of different areas to analyze it. But again, creating that overall structure of accountability is going to be one of the key, most important things that an organization can do. So there are, as we sort of bubble up those areas, there's a number of KPIs and metrics that we can look at to understand how the programs we put in place work, how effective they are, and whether or not they need to be changed. As an example, if I look at just sort of three main items within supply chain, one is that the cost of the good. So if I look at the landed cost, am I fully automating every process I can? Am I optimizing my transportation logistics? Then if I look at my inventory, am I optimizing inventory levels and sharing the inventory with my supplier? Is there a shared risk model in making sure it's at an optimal level? And then if I look at my selling and admin costs around that, do I have the level of automation in my procurement, in my contracting, so that I can gain maximum efficiency and have my folks focus on more value-added activities, like, for example, trying to create models to predict and change the variables so that I can maintain the efficiencies I want in my supply chain. All this obviously takes the ability to look at performance and share that performance with your suppliers, with your stakeholders, with the consumer. Simple things like being able to show a consumer where an item is in terms of the process and and when they can expect delivery, whether it's a business consumer or an individual consumer, is very important to keep their level of satisfaction high. That takes a level of automation, which would then again bring those efficiencies and create those transparent information flows, which would again, lower or optimize the overall spend on delivering that item to the ultimate stakeholder. Another area of interest is discount management. Is an organization optimizing discounts across all their vendors, not just for one location, but for all locations, and is an ability to bubble it up and create an aggregate program for the organization, which again would have metrics around it and goals so that everybody involved would understand how to achieve the desired outcome. So we walked through, at a high level, a number of areas where supply chain can be optimized. And if I bubble it up to really three main takeaways, which I hope you'll be able to take away from this presentation, to optimize supply chain involves three key things. One, understanding the maturity of your existing supply chain and understanding where along those transition points you can automate, you can look for process improvements, and you can adopt technologies to facilitate that. The next area is really around accountability. In the entire process, in the entire chain of events from source to end customer, do people understand the outcomes that are expected in their position, and is there an easy ability to monitor those and an ability to easily react to changes in the environment so that you can maintain the outcomes desired? And third, transparency in the process. Is there, for example, a supplier portal where information can be easily shared? Do you have a knowledge management portal where lessons learned, best practices are housed? And this is some key findings from some of the leaders in this area. They share information freely and openly so that decisions can be made quickly and accurately. And you can react again to that globally complex supply chain system. There's a number of other things around enabling the flow of information. For example, we talked about a problem being the fact that data is very disparate. It's in multiple organizational systems, multiple operational systems. It could be in an ERP, it could be in a logistics system, procurement system. One idea, one strategy that has worked well for every client is creating an aggregated source of truth, a data warehouse, with all this information, so that information is collected automatically, integrated accurately, and is able to be used to judge historical performance and do a level of forecasting to again try and predict the evolving environment and make changes as needed not only react, but try and be as proactive as possible. Another key area is if you can again look at lagging indicators like your trends and your patterns in historical performance, but really those best in class look at the leading indicators, changes in consumer behavior, changes in supply chain variables, changes in price in commodity prices. These are the things that will impact your landed cost and impact your bottom line, and these are the things where you can make changes in the supply chain to react to. So there's a number of areas where you can look at, but again, it's the overall structure of accountability for everybody involved in the process, and it's the programmatic approach to your supply chain that will create the efficiencies desired. And just to close it off, before we attend to some questions, Hitachi, having worked with clients in multiple industries on their supply chain, can help you get started on this. And really the way to get started is to understand the nature of the organizational maturity for supply chain and where are the areas where you can seek the most benefit. So in a half-a-day workshop, we can guide you through the steps it would take to create a roadmap to understand those areas of highest impact and how we can create solutions to drive the efficiencies desired. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dinah to see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Rob. Yep, we have a few questions from our audience today. So first one of those being, what is most important when implementing supply chain analytics?
The most important thing really is creating a structures and a programmatic approach to supply chain analytics. So it's really understanding your maturity, your existing maturity in your supply chain. How, for example, how automated is it or how manual is it? What are the roles and responsibilities of all the parties involved? What are the obligations, goals, and metrics that everybody is judged by? And coming up with a structure that's going to drive efficiencies and that's going to be implemented and carried out throughout the organization and easily shared with all the stakeholders involved. So that, again, you have that transparent flow of accurate and timely information.
Thanks, Rob. And we had another question today. So where should an organization get started to improve supply chain performance or start their supply chain practice?
Like a lot of BI projects, it's best to start small and create essentially what I call a proof of concept, create a pilot. So choose an area that potentially may be low-hanging fruit that you know you can improve, create an accountability structure, and create a set of goals and outcomes in that area. It might be the level of automation for contract approval. Today, for example, it takes 5 days to get approval, and you set a goal of 3 days, then create a plan to take it from the 5 days to 3 days. It may mean creating a system to automatically send the documents to the appropriate people for approval. With that win, then you can start looking at an enterprise-wide process to set goals and metrics for all the stakeholders and each of those transition points to, again, come up with a level of efficiency that is desired, and understand that this is a long-term ongoing process and ongoing structure that is put in place.
Thanks, Rob. Well, this concludes our question and answer session today. Rob, thanks again for preparing this presentation for us and sharing your knowledge. Before we conclude, a friendly reminder about our half-day workshop. Details regarding the offer are available on your screen, and please contact myself to learn more about this opportunity. My contact details are in the bottom left-hand corner there. To everyone that joined us today, thanks again very much for your time. We hope you got something out of today's presentation, and with that, we'll conclude. Thanks again.